Hello, this video is going to introduce you to imaginary numbers. Now, they are a new set of numbers that includes I. Please do not write I like that. You want to make sure that you put a little tail on it, specifically to the right. Otherwise, it might look like a number 1 to your grader, and if you do the little tail on the left, it's going to look like a J. So we have I, which stands for imaginary. Now, it comes from not being able to take the square root of a negative number. So we say that the square root of -1 is the number I, just like 3.14 is the number pi. Now, we did talk about this in class, but your calculator must be in A plus BI mode. So let's put our online calculators in that mode. We're going to go to mode, and then we're going to scroll down to where it says real, and switch over to A plus BI, hit enter. Second, quit. So now on the top middle of your calculator, you should see in the banner A plus BI. Now I in your calculator is second decimal. So second decimal will get you that I button. And look, if you even try to take the square root of -1, your calculator tells you it is I. So your calculator tells you that the square root of -9 is 3i. Let's talk about why that is. So when we're expressing or simplifying radicals in simplest form, you need to break it up. So we have that -9 is now the square root of 9 times the square root of -1. We know the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of -1 we call I. That's where it comes from. Do you need to show the step? No, just jump straight to 3i. Let's do the next one. We have 5, and then the square root of -18 breaks up into 18 is what times what? 18 is 9 times 3, right? But we have -18. So you need to make sure one of those numbers are negative. I personally like to put my negative with the perfect square. So I have 5. Square root of -9 is 3. Because it's negative, I'm going to put an I. And then I have the square root of 3, which I cannot simplify. 5 times 3 is 15. We have an I. We have the square root of 3. And I do put the I before the radical, before the square root of 3, because if you switched it and wrote 15 square root of 3, if you accidentally put the I under the radical, that's not good, and it's incorrect. You need to make sure the I is outside of the radical, but when you're rushing, it's hard to write it properly, so just put the I before the square root. That way you avoid any mistakes. Let's do the next one. The square root of -6. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, but neither of those are perfect squares. So you cannot simplify the square root of 6, but you can take out the negative. And we're just going to write that as I radical 6. Let's talk about what a complex number is. So these were imaginary numbers because they have one part, and that part consists of I. A complex number, because we got to make it complicated, is a number of the form A plus BI, where A is a real number and BI is the imaginary number. For example, 3 plus 2i. A would be 3, B would be 2, and then you got I, because you have the real part and you have the imaginary part. Altogether makes it a complex number. Now, when we start solving equations that involve imaginary numbers, you're going to notice that all solutions, if you're dealing with imaginary numbers and complex numbers, they come in pairs. They have partners, and those pairs are called conjugate pairs. They are two complex numbers that are the same with the exception of the imaginary part. So, for example, conjugate pairs would be 3 plus 2i and 3 minus 2i. They are the same except for one is plus 2i and one is minus 2i. So they are partners. Now, operations with complex numbers work the same as with real numbers, only like terms are combined. And remember that on this regions, we do not like any exponents on I. So we will always use our calculator to simplify that. I will explain what I mean. Let's identify conjugates. Well, if you have negative 3 plus 2i, the conjugate, you're going to switch the imaginary part. That's going to be negative 3 minus 2i. If you have 5 minus 8i, switch the imaginary part. 5 plus 8i. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal now, but I will explain why it's important when we get to solving equations. Let's talk about how to do operations with complex numbers. Remember, these are complex because they involve real numbers like the number 5 and imaginary numbers like 3i. Now, it's going to work exactly like x. X plus x is 2x, I plus I is 2i. So let's see, the first thing we are going to do is we are going to distribute the negative 2. We have 5 minus I minus 2. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6i. And now you are going to combine like terms. 5 minus 2 is 3. Negative I plus 6i, well, negative 1 plus 6 is 5i. And notice how it says a plus bi form, meaning this is the correct format. You have the a and then you have the bi. A is 3, b is 5. If you wrote 5i plus 3, that would be incorrect, and you would actually lose a point for that. Now, you can do this in your calculator. So what I want you guys to do is take out that calculator and double check. We have parentheses, 5 minus I, second decimal, minus 2. Make sure you're not doing the negative button. You want the subtraction. 1 minus 3, second decimal to get an I. And you get 3 plus 5i. And actually, on the regions, you can use your calculator and just straight up write the answer. Isn't that nice? But then we get number 7, and number 7 is an actual regions question. So for number 7, it's a little bit different. And maybe you'll notice that number 7 has a variable. You cannot put this in the calculator because you can't plug variables into your home screen. You also can't put it in y equals because you know how you can't see imaginary friends? Well, you can't see imaginary numbers. It won't graph either. So what are we going to do? We're going to manipulate the problem. That way we can use our calculator. So because of the commutative property, you can actually switch the order of multiplication. And I'm going to rewrite this as x 7i plus 5i cubed. All of this is going to go in the calculator. And I'm going to get x times whatever the calculator tells me. So 7i parentheses I plus 5i cubed. My calculator tells me that's 28 plus 0i. Okay. Sometimes your calculator gives you a weird response. This is the case where it gives you a real weird answer. 0i is just 0 of them. So you don't actually need that. This is just 28. And then, what's 28 times x? 28x. And you are done. Don't worry about how the I went away. We'll talk about that another time. But your calculator can do operations with I. So for example, I squared, the I disappears and just becomes -1. And you could always use your calculator to simplify this. Guess we're talking about now. I to the, let's try 8th power, simplifies to just the number 1. So you're always going to want to simplify those things in your calculator. Anyway, you try some examples on your